Right. Thanks for coming. This is the ominous class, putting the garden to bed. Sounds like kind of a bummer for the winter, right? We gotta get some things ready to go for winter. We'll talk about kind of a lot of odds and ends today. We'll have lots of time for questions afterwards, so I'll kind of go through my thing, and then you can ask whatever you'd like. But there's going to be quite a bit to cover. We started this class because I thought, you know, I'm a nurseryman, so guess when I'm not home very often? February, March, April, May, June. I'm glued to my job here. So it's like, what can I get done so I don't have to come home to a mess every day in February and March? So this will hopefully give you a couple things. We still got some time to get some projects done. You can pick away at over the winter. Maybe a little less work to go for spring and summer next year. Okay. So if everyone's got the handout, it's you know, this is one we probably start with a quick discussion on climate. Are we all like walk around the room and say, where's everyone live? That'll take too long, but there's so many microclimates around here depending on where you're at. I'm right in the middle of Everett. I'm surprisingly cold sometimes. It's kind of shocking to me, like we'll be colder than up here on the ridge at Sunnyside when I come into work in the winter. But you would know your yard better than me, and the reason I bring this up is because someone inevitably asks, well, what do I have to protect? What do I have to bring inside? What do I have to do this to, that to, mulch, all the rest? You know, you're going to have to take the risk at your yard like I do in mine on some things and make your own choice. If you jump on the fancy internet phone, I think every website's going to tell you you belong. Oh, you live in this zip code, you're in zone AB. I would say not to that. If you want my opinion, I'd stay with 7, would be much safer. 8 degrees is like 20 degrees. So how many days did we get below 20 last year? About 15 of them, if I remember right. So that's the stuff that I would worry about protecting. If you look up some of your plants, you're worried about zone 8, you know, maybe it'll go damaged, maybe it'll get tip damage, on and on and on. Those are the things I would probably focus on, maybe worrying a little bit more about here in the winter. I don't know what the winter's going to do. This is one of those areas of the country we just never know. It's supposed to be a wet, mild winter. From what I hear, my old bones are probably telling me the same thing, but we'll see what happens. Last year we got really cold in December twice, which got a lot of stuff in my yard, I'll admit too, and some things I was surprised got hit. So we can't do anything about Mother Nature, but we can do a little bit extra to protect some things, which hopefully we'll learn a little bit about today. Okay, so we kind of start out with that little climate discussion. Like I said, one of my big goals in this is hopefully to give you folks some ideas on some things to go home and get ahead on spring projects. You know, on top of the list, the two top of the ones for me up here are always slugs and weeds. You know, if we leave our slugs to run haven here over the winter, they've laid eggs around all the plants they like, and they hatch out and they just mow the same thing down again next year. So you would again know the things in your yard. What should we protect? What should we get a little shield around? What do we want to clean the debris away from to maybe get ahead on the slugs a little bit? At Sunnyside, I'm happy to say it's been years, me even going back to whites, we just don't like to sell a lot of poison. So metal aldehydes you will not find here. You can go to a Walmart, Home Depot kind of place will probably still have some old murder, death, kill metal aldehydes on their shelf. That's nasty stuff for the birds, the pets, us, everything above. So we only do iron phosphate when we talk slugs. And I think sometimes this is a little confusing these days, like why do we have that, why do we have that, and why do we have that? So I brought all 3 of them in here to kind of give you a little quick thing on slugs. This is all organic iron phosphate based, so this is not poisonous to anything. I know I put it out. I heard a couple people talking for a class, and the same thing in my house. A couple of little juncos and this and that like to peck away for some extra iron. It's not going to hurt them. We can certainly hide it from them a little bit, but the granular stuff tends to last, you know, probably 30 days, you know, more so than the old gels and poisons and things. They'll last quite a while in the winter. Whether you do it now, whether you do it kind of in February, at some point, we'd like to get those susceptible plants cleaned away. You know what they like in your yard, certain perennials and things. Let's get the debris away from those, mulch it, throw it away, whatever you're gonna do, and then get that shield up around there so they can't get back in there in spring. You know, speaking for me, it happens with a couple every year. I forget. It's like, where did that go? It was up last week and now it's nothing again. They'll eat it to the ground when they hatch out. So So try to get ahead. You know, we got December, we got all winter, you know, again, as long as we get this down before we get into the spring growth here in 2024, we get ahead of slugs. Now, Sluggo, there's nothing wrong with the original. Sluggo is just pure iron phosphate. We probably still sell more of that than any of them, to be honest with you, especially easy little shaker can, a little more easy to apply. You'll see Max, which is new, and the only difference with that is the attractant. So I'm afraid a lot of people look at both of these and just stick with what they like, or choose this one because it's new and they don't know how to use it. This will cover, like this little can will do about 10,000 square feet. So this covers a massive amount of area. We don't need very much, and I think if you're used to using Sluggo, we sprinkle X amount out, you're gonna do the same thing with Sluggo Max and you're wasting your money. So really think about which one you get. This is the exact same thing, but it's just going to go 10 times as far. So I don't need very much, and it's going to last maybe a little bit longer, okay? This, the only difference with Sluggo Plus is this has spinosad or spinosad in it. So if I was interested in not just slug, but also having some of that in the surface soil, again, organic, it's not going to hurt anything. Spinosad's an organic compound, but now I throw things in like sow bugs and pill bugs and some other surface type insects that I can kill with that as well. So you can kind of pick which one's for you. I honestly have never had the need to use this. I don't mind my decomposers going on the ground. They're going to help me out in the long term. Sometimes it is a problem around certain plants, especially sometimes in the vegetable garden. That's a pretty effective thing to use around carrots and root crops and things, certainly when we get into spring. But probably one of those would be the consideration for getting ahead on the slug, okay? So there's our slimy mollusk, right? We'll start with that. It's a fun one. Weeds, I kind of chuckled because I was surprised. Who has a million popweeds already? I'll raise my hand. I pulled a bunch last week, but you know, this is the time of year to get ahead. Once we get that fall rain, and I would say especially this year, I've never seen it so dry in Western Washington, going back all the way to April essentially. Now we've got some water. Guess what happens? Water hits soil, all those little dormant seeds like to pop right back up. So I have seen a lot of weeds popping out of my own garden here, and it's mulched pretty well still here from spring. So watch for the weeds, whether you pull them, whether you get a magical hula hoe, like a little exercise, you want to do some spraying. I would really recommend jumping on that here pretty quick. We're running out of days where we're warm enough and dry enough to get sprays to work very well. So in the garden, we'll kind of attack this in two phases, in the garden part of it and then the lawn part of it. If you're at the lawn seminar, you remember we've got a couple of options we can use for lawns. If we pull those three out from Bonide there, if we start with kind of the heavier chemical, brush killer sounds funny, but if I'm going to kill weeds and not hurt grass, that will not hurt lawns or any other type of grass. So that's going to kill everything else, horsetail even, blackberries, buttercup, but I can't get that on my shrubs, my perennials, the rest of it, and that is chemical. So if you're an organic one, that's probably not the choice for you. But if I have still these, you know, 50 degree, 60 degree temperatures, I can still get death. If I don't do it now, right coming out of winter would be ideal before it has a chance to go. The one thing I'll say with brush killer, you know, the worst thing is to go home and whack all your stuff down and then think you're going to spray. So don't cut it off. The more leaves I have, the more stems I have, the more chance I have that soak in and nuke the root system and it doesn't come back. So don't, most people's mistake is even in spring, well, I got blackberries, I'll walk out and machete them all down or weed whack it all and then I'll go spray. Well, you're probably going to get some, but if I leave all that fresh spring growth and have some foliage, that's the time of year that they're soaking it down to the root system quicker and you'll have 100% death, maybe a little bit easier, okay? So brush killer, Weed Beater Ultra is another chemical lawn herbicide, so that would not hurt my grass again, but it would kill the weeds in the grass, clovers, dandelion, on and on and on. The reason we carry that maybe more so than other products that I see at stores is that goes down to about 45 degrees. So I think that allows you as a gardener to have good effectiveness here in the fall and then early spring, whether either way you choose, you're gonna get good death without having to wait for it to be 75 degrees, which some years is not till 4th of July, right? Other years it's a little bit earlier. So we wanna get ahead before they go to seed that would be another choice. If you're going to go organic, this is what I use at my house. This is, they got a Captain Jack's Lawn Weed Brew now. Everything's got Captain Jack's name in it. So this is a natural iron compound, HETA iron. This is something that would be listed as natural. We don't have any chemical in there. Long story short, a grass can absorb a massive amount of iron and a plant cannot. So if I spray that on my lawn, I will kill the weeds. I'll kill moss is a huge bonus with that. That'll also nuke your moss out of there if you want to get it all at once. That would do both of those without harming my turf again. Sometimes you'll sprays. Yeah, these are all sprays, and this is something here you'll see you got it on. When I walk around, I don't have a lot of weeds because I keep up on a few every week. But in my lawn, if I sprayed that on, I would see almost a dark black-green circle every place that I sprayed it. Because the grass will absorb that iron and turn a really super dark black-green, whereas the rest of the lawn we don't need to hit. It's going to stay that same lighter color green. So.
Buttercups too?
Buttercup, I'll be honest with you, you're going to have to go to heavier duty. I don't think you're going to have much luck. You could try, if it's young and in spring and you got it a few times, you probably would win with that, but that's going to be a little tougher one. Clover and Buttercup are going to be the two harder ones to do.
What about pet safe?
This is totally pet safe. Anything I apply, including this, I'm not going to spray that on my grass and let my dog follow me around. I don't want the iron on his paws. I don't want him tracking in the house. Iron stains. That gets on your driveway, you're going to have an orange circle. You get it on your deck, you're going to have a spot. So let's plan on a dry day. Need an hour or two to dry it on, then you're good to go. And you don't have any issues with that.
We usually put lime on our lawn this time of
year. Yep.
Does it matter which you use first, that?
Doesn't matter the order, because the lime, she asked about lime, lime, lawn, it's always the best and most important time of the year to feed your lawn is in the fall too, if you haven't done that. So if I get an organic lawn food and lime, I want to do that in the opposite weather. I want the most wet rainstorm coming the next day that's ever been, so that it soaks it down into the soil. Then again, I don't have to do any extra work.
So can you apply both of them at the same time?
Absolutely. Yeah, you put your food down, then you can spray right over the top of it. It's not going to hurt anything.
The last question is, how should you trim your lawn as low as it can go in the winter time? Or is it
I don't know that I'd mow it as low as it can go as far as the height of the grass. If you're going to thatch and stuff, at some point, either you did it in the fall or spring, yeah, we would scalp it down that one time so we can get all the debris out of there and then reseed and let it start over again. Yeah. Okay. So we got some weed talk. Let's get on cutting back perennials. You were chucking about my mushers on there before class. So if I take perennials kind of as a huge group, I would call, we got some evergreen ones, I'm going to call them sticks, and we got mushers. And the mushers are, of course, think hosta. It just kind of melts and turns to slime. We kind of scrape it up and fling it in the yard waste, and we'll see you again next year. So that stuff I don't have any problem cleaning up here as it goes dormant if you wish. The sticks you got to be a little more careful of, and I'll say this with perennials, that I would never touch hardy fuchsia. I would not touch salvias. So those two plants for sure, you're going to walk away from here, let them turn brown, let them do their seed, whatever they're going to do, and just let them sit. And we walk out next March, early April, and let it tell us where we're going to cut it back. Because every time I've cut those back in the fall, they do not come back the next year, especially the hot lips and the popular ones that most gardeners are growing now. So leave them alone. If we don't have a brutal winter, if we're not too wet, it's always drainage with those more than it is temperature, then it will come off green on the wood. At that point, I cut it back to those points, and here we go again. My salvia came back nicely again, even after last winter in my little butterfly garden. So we walk away from a couple things. I would also throw in that coneflowers. We got a lot of customers doing coneflowers. You guys got coneflowers going? It's a great pollinator perennial. I have far too many different ones in different spots in my own yard, and it's one I would not touch much in the fall. If you want to deadhead the CD flowers and you're OCD like me, that's fine, but we're not going to cut that plant down to the ground. The tendency is for water to collect on there, and they will rot here in the wet winter. I've had a lot of people call about coneflowers in the spring. I just bought 3, none of them come back. If we have good drainage, it's never a temperature thing with those. Those will go down 20, 30 below zero, the vast majority of them. So it's always going to be too wet where I cut them down and they rotted on the crown, and I got to replace it again the next year. Okay. So keep in mind with sticks, you know, whether you do a little bit in the fall, that's fine. Some things we're going to wait till spring, like I mentioned, but at some point we would like to get that cleaned up going into spring. And especially if we had issues with it last year. We already talked about slugs. There's one of them. Would be diseases. I had mildew, whatever it is. If I have any diseased perennial plant, period, that's the debris I want out of my yard. I don't want that mulch sitting there because it's just going to blow right back on come springtime again. So try to clean up the vast majority of that. Mushers could be a lot of things again. I think that's an easy one. Most people know hosta. We'll just kind of scrape up the snot and throw it away. There's plenty of other perennials like that that'll melt pretty quickly with the first frost. Easy to clean up and toss. The evergreen ones might be a little tougher because, you know, heucheras. I have heucheraitis, the addiction to heucheras. I got lots of hellebores around. We have berginias. We have a lot of evergreen perennials that should keep some structure for us over the winter. I'm not as worried about cutting those back. If we're going to cut something like heuchera back to keep it attractive, that's probably an August thing. We clean up some leaves, we get a bunch of fresh foliage, we enjoy it all winter. We check it after winter, we got nice fresh foliage for the summer season, and we do it again in the fall. So I check mine twice a year. Hellebores, you for sure want to go out and cut all those leaves off around the holidays. That would be my number one thing with hellebores. The complaints I hear, the leaves look great, I flip them over, and what do we got? We have coating of aphids, whiteflies, nice chewy, sucky sugar bugs underneath there. If I was one, that's where I'd want to hang out too. I got nice thick leaves to keep me happy in the winter, and I got lots of sugar to eat. So we flip them over. Don't waste your time spraying. You know, none of that even matters. Just cut the leaves off at the crown, throw them in the yard waste. You'll have brand new healthy foliage come out, and you'll see the flowers a lot better too. So it won't affect the plant at all. So I'm always out Christmas. Right then, all the leaves coming off, all my different hellebores, and there we go for another season. I've never had to worry about bugs or spraying, okay? So we got the perennials. The last one there on the first section is tough with me because I'm pretty OCD. I like to look out in my garden and see nice tidy little clumps of this and fresh compost and everything nice and clean. And I fight my left brain, right brain on what to clean up and what to leave because, you know, the man gave us leaves and material to make more compost, to help preserve our soil, to give us nutrients. I would never tell you to go out and clean every single speck of whatever up. That would be, I'll leave that up to you. I'll do one more question. We're going to do questions after, so we can keep going. What's the question?
How about the roadies? Do you clean up all those leaves up?
I would, and again, so this is what I would say about the leaf cleanup. If I had any disease again, I have old evergreen foliage. It's not going to turn to compost very quickly. I don't want leaves on my lawn. If you want your grass to look nice, we don't want to bury it with a bunch of leaves. It's not going to look so nice coming out of winter. Maybe that's what we focus on, or we get it all brushed into the beds and allow it to start decomposing and make a mulch layer. I'm fine with that. So I try not to clean everything up because it's food for the hummingbirds. The birds will salvage a lot of the seeds. There's a lot of good wildlife attributes we would get if we can leave some of that out there. So if it was my advice, I would say focus on, again, the things that are prone, the things that had disease. What can I keep clean so I don't have to worry about in spring? Maybe that's what the focus is, and it's not start at one corner and get every single little twig and leaf picked up so it's just immaculate all winter. That's probably what I do too much of, but we won't go quite that far, okay? So everybody good on that first section? We can take a little break for questions. So a couple things here, we'll go through these bullet points. You know, when I started doing this class, I thought it was a good community service thing. It's like everybody's got yards. Everybody's got, it's like I just sat down and was like, what do I want to do in the fall? What do I always try to get done so that I'm a little bit ahead in the spring? So the first thing there, we're talking about storm bulbs. Now who's got dahlias going? Begonias. Other things we got to store. Do we store them or do we leave them in the ground?
Well, I try to store them, but
Store 'em.
I haven't stored them yet. Until this year.
I haven't either, so. Again, I don't know, some of these things, yes, it would be a temperature thing. You're not going to keep annual begonias outside in the winter. We would have to store something like that. Dahlias, I get 99% of mine back, and it's not the cold usually, it's the wet. So if I have really good drainage, you might be okay leaving them where they are. You know, I started out with, you know, okay, this one's from my grandma. I don't ever want to lose that because I'll probably never find it again. So those got dug because I didn't want to take a chance. Other ones, like, you know, throw it in there, see what happens. And 99% of the time they come back at my places. I have good drainage, beds are built up, and it's not clay. So you're taking a risk. I mean, I'll be honest, to leaving a dahlia in. If you're gonna dig them and store them like we typically do, it's probably time to do that here pretty quick. We've gotten our first frost. The dahlias, I know I chopped mine all off when I was home last weekend. We had frosted black hanging dahlias, so time to cut them off there above the ground. And I probably won't dig my clumps. I'm going to see what happens again this winter, but they're in certain areas that I know, again, I've got a little bit better drainage. You got a quick, yeah.
What about glass?
So glads you shouldn't have to worry about as long as I have drainage again. Any bulb is not going to care for clay or water pooling up, but as long as we have drainage, I think you're okay with glads. Dahlias, begonias, some people like to save their begonias year to year. I think they're pretty inexpensive, so I was like, I don't have time for it. I'll just go buy 2 new ones next year. But again, sometimes there's a special variety you can't much find anymore. We save some here from our landscape. We'll throw them in the house for the winter, get them started early, and get cuttings and put them back out for sale again next year. Some of the cooler ones we can't find. So begonias would be another one. Cannas is another one. You know, I tried leaving mine. I didn't want to do canna lilies. Big, huge foliage, tropical. They look awesome in pots, even in the ground. That probably is, again, a little more of a temperature one and not so much wet, because we can grow most cannas in kind of a boggy or pond location anyway. If we're losing them, it's probably too cold. So that is one. Like taros, I don't know if any elephant ears. There's a lot of things that'll grow from a large bulb like that we might buy one year that we can in the fall uproot, clean the bulb, dry it, store it, and have it again to replant in that container for the next season. Some people I see leave cannas in, they come back every year. You know, good for them. They've got a spot they liked in there. But if you want to be for sure, we would pull those in. Sometimes I would just say this. You can look online. I could probably pick 12, 15, 20 different medias where you could put them in sawdust. And this person swears by vermiculite. And this one wants popcorn. This person doesn't like anything. This paper bag or newspaper. We can go on and on. There's a zillion different ways to wrap and store them. The one thing I would always consider is maybe taking a fungicide, like a good copper fungicide, liquid copper, bonite copper, make a little paint can solution of it where you can dip your bulbs to get that shield up from getting any rot. Then we can just lay them out and dry them. Then when they're dry, now we can go ahead and store them, kind of thing. So never in plastic bags, something breathable. You know, newspaper, burlap. We've had people borrow burlap for that too. But we want somewhere cool and dry, so non-freezing. You know, if you got a crawl space underneath the house, you know, garage, it's not heated. Back, you know, there's all kinds of places we can put them, but we just don't want to have them in the house where it's warm. Okay. So there's a little bulbs. You know, protecting the lawn. You know, we talked a little bit about weeds already. She brought up, you know, you have moss killer if you haven't done that. Again, like I said, a good organic fertilizer is the best thing you could ever do for your lawn in the fall. That's the most important fertilizer of the year. For grass, if you ask me, if you haven't done it yet, sprinkle it out. Get it on there because it will really help out when we get towards spring. You'll have a much better looking grass. The things I would probably watch for is turf disease. As we go in here to the wet, this is something I fight in my yard because I don't use a lot of chemicals, so I'll show you a couple different ways to attack it. But things like red thread, snow mold, dollar spot, there's all kinds of thatch or turf diseases that will come in here in the wet winter. And if I look out and have pretty decent lawn usually, and I've got kind of random circular patches that have died out, you can look at the blades real close and probably see the spores on there where you are getting the disease going. Is it the end of the world? No. Does it probably kill your whole lawn? You know, probably not, but it could, you know. And the problem with the turf disease is every time you step on it, you run something over it, you just moved it from here to there to there, and it'll cover the whole grass. So there's been some winters, it's not been so good coming out of winter at my place. There's been other years I hardly have any of it, so a little bit of it's the weather. The one thing I would say is this: if you could choose to spray or fertilize. Now, it always goes away in the spring. If we thatch, we put some food down in the spring, you're going to get beautiful grass again. It tends to grow right through that when we get some nitrogen on it. But if you were going to protect it, you know, or maybe spray if we have it started already, the choices are this. Now, this is chemical in a bag. You know, some people like to throw that in a sprayer. That's probably not the most safe thing for, again, pets, all the rest of it. I don't know that we'll be carrying this much long-termer because I think there's better options even for chemicals these days. But it does do the job. If I had a whole yard filled with red thread, that's probably where I might have to start, if we let it go for a long time. I guess for maybe I'm getting old, I just don't like granular. If I'm going to spray, if I'm going to try to take care of a problem and I have to go the chemical route, I would rather focus it with a liquid right on what I want to spray and not broadcast this over 5,000 square feet when I really just needed that and this and that and that, if that makes sense. So I could do the same thing in a liquid. Once I spray that on there and it dries on again, I'm okay with my dog and everything else running around. But the granular stuff, you got to get it on and hope that one of those little granules sits right in the right spot, if you know what I mean, to do the job you want. So infuse is one. I would probably try to talk you into doing more like one of these two. Copper fungicide, this is what every golf course uses all the time. As long as I don't live on water, copper's a very safe fungicide. It's not organic, but it's a natural type fungicide. So it's non-systemic. Yes, it's chemicals, it's got copper in it, but I just worry about the sound, the river, the stream. It's not going to go into your soil and wash away and go all the way to sound. It's not that. It's just if you physically lived on a body of water, I'd be a little more careful with the copper. This is what I use when I go fungicide really for the entire yard these days. This is called Revitalize, and that sounds like it's got a great name, biofungicide. If I said biofungicide, you'd probably look at me and think we're sounding like some sort of nuclear death. But that is organic. So that is a solution of bacillus bacteria. Long story short, how about fungus eating bacteria? That's what that is. So that hurts nothing. I can put that, I put it on my roses, my vegetable garden, my lawn, anything in the yard. And I've got 100% safe type fungicide that I can use. Maybe years ago, this used to come out like on a brand name, like anyone seen Serenade? It was in kind of a pretty red bottle. That's Serenade, same idea, but the concentration's like 20 times better and it's about half the price of Serenade these days. So we get Revitalized in from Bonide. That would be my organic option, not just for turf disease, but for use all year round in the garden. That's a pretty effective little spray, okay? So the next one up is dormant spraying. Who dormant sprays already in their yard a little bit? Okay, got one or two. So if you're gonna dormant spray, I would always start that discussion by saying this: you don't have to go home and dormant spray your whole yard. This isn't my dad from 40 years ago growing up like, oh, it's winter time, we gotta go spray the whole yard. It's not that. It's have a purpose. What did I have a problem with? I would always think back in the gardening brain, this season, spring, summer, fall, what did I fight issues with? Was it the rose? Was it my fruit tree? The berry? Anything in the yard that struggled with disease? That's what I'm going to probably try to focus that stuff on. This year, we had pruning class yesterday, and I asked how many people had pear rust. Who has pear trees? Got a few. And who had the nice, beautiful orange pustules all over the plant last year? That's a great example of the way the weather went. I've never seen more of that in my life. It looks like the plague, but it's really not the plague, to be honest with you. It looks horrible, and it's one of those things, if you don't want it back, I can guarantee it's going to be back on the pears again next year unless we get some protection down. So that's a great example. Apple scab, peach leaf curl, I can go on and on. Fruit is a must, I think, with dormant spray, but roses, other things as well. If you've had issues with any of that, the liquid cop is the fungicide part of this. The horticultural oil is the organic insect part of this. The funny thing is with these, the modern sprays, who's like anybody still use like lime sulfur for rotten eggs or any of the old sprays that we always used growing up. This is a different creature, because these last a lot longer, and I can use this during the growing season. So I have no problem with either of these. I could use that for my copper instead of the other one, and I can use it in March, and I can use it in May, and I can use it in June, and I can use it in the fall. It doesn't have to just be in the dead of winter, if that makes sense.
Are those going to help with the black spot in the roses?
They will, but again, I don't want to turn this into disease class, but the problem with disease is wind, rain, Washington. So you could take care of yours. The lady across the fence does not. You have a perfectly clean, healthy rose in March, and then 1 month later, hers is spores out with black spot, just blows right on, says, ooh, there's another one I'll get on, then you got it back again. So this isn't, you know, not to pick on rose, but for a rose in particular, this is a dormant spray, and it's a March, and it's an April, and it's a May, and it's a June. I mean, we just keep going once a month, and you'll have clean roses. If we walk away, come out in July and say, oh my God, what happened? You probably got black spot for the year, I hate to say. So stay up early will help you quite a bit.
And you
Okay.
said that's all pet safe, right?
So again, any spray, as long as this has a chance to dry on, I just need a dry morning in the winter. It doesn't matter how cold it is. I don't care if it rains that night, whatever. I just need a few hours for this to dry on.
Okay.
Not going to spray it on my dog or my kid, but as long as it dries on the plant, I don't have any bad residual.
Okay.
This, I would say this. So the horticultural oil is organic. So if I had bug issue, one time's fine. I don't think you have to repeat this very much. The fungicide part of this is what I keep saying. I would try to maybe get it a couple of times as we go through. This year in particular, you know, if we look at the apple scab I saw this year and the pear rust and things, maybe after we've gotten this frost and my leaves are on the ground and all that, I would be probably asking you to maybe go out and hit it once here pretty quick before Christmas. Wait 6 weeks, and then before it blooms again, we're going to hit this. I'll go through this on the fruit class too in the spring. We would hit it one more time to be safe here before it blooms. Never ever spray dormant spray in flower. I'd say that 5 times, it'll waste time. Don't spray it when it's blooming. We got no bees. Okay, so make sure it's not in bloom, and we can kind of get that pre-bloom. This year maybe it's a late fall, early winter pre-bloom, and then we can monitor it after it's done blooming to see how we keep it clean through the growing season. Okay. So liquid cop, the reason we went to this, we carry pretty much 100% bonide. I have my fancy degree in chemistry years ago, and I hated being a chemist, so I went back to plants. But this is the form of copper I've been looking for, because this is a different complex than any of the other coppers on the market, and this is like a range shield. So this one for sure, 30 days. If I put this on a bare twig, it dries on. And the ammonium type of copper's literally got about a 30-day residual. So when that windstorm comes and blows that pear rust right back onto my pear, I've got something on there that's going to say, no, not my pear. You can go ahead and just die there on the surface, and we can keep it clean a little bit longer. Okay. So dormant spray, I'll tell you, we will have it on sale. I haven't got my huge shipment yet, but when I watch the class schedule, we've already done 2024. It'll be up on the website here as we go through the next few weeks. But I can tell you the mid-January, the fruit classes, the berry class, all that stuff that happens early, there's going to be some specials and things going on the dormant spray like we always do too. So, okay. So dormant spray, I've talked a little bit about fruit and berries already, and I would just add this specifically. Whether we're talking about the rest, whether we're talking about mummyberry and blueberries, apple scab, peach leaf curl, we can go on and on to the typical things that we might find in our orchards here in Western Washington. If I had any of that on the disease side, I don't want the leaves on the ground. So those are the areas that I'm talking about earlier that we want to clean up. I don't want that stuff sitting on there and creating mulch. It's just going to blow right back on come springtime. So focus on those issues, especially with the edible stuff, blueberries, raspberries, all of our different fruit trees that might have had issues. We get that cleaned up and thrown away here this winter. Don't leave it sit as mulch. The most important part of that is going to be the fruit. So who had apple maggots this year? I'll raise my hand. I had a few too. So apple maggots and insects like that, the same thing. The more fruit you leave hanging there, mummified fruit of the tree or rotting on the ground, that is where that larva is going to overwinter and then hatch right out in spring and start laying more eggs, and then you got 10 times the apple maggot again in 2024. So sometimes just get a broom, you know, walk out and kind of knock those dead fruits out of the tree, get one nice little cleanup here when we're done picking, and then we'll, again, much better chance of staying clean going into the next gardening season, okay? Overwintering the vegetable garden. So who's got vegetable garden in here? Everybody got a little vegetable? Everybody's growing vegetables these days, right? Even me, and I'm not a huge vegetable fan, so I grow them for my wife, right? You know, there's a couple things we could do. I don't know, have you guys picked everything out of the garden still, or you still getting a little bit? We're still pulling carrots out and a few things still. So I'm not kind of ready to do it quite yet. As long as we stay kind of mild. Sometimes in the winter, I know my neighbor grows wonderful vegetables 12 months of the year. She's got some covers on her raised beds. She's able to almost harvest 12 months out of the year over there. This is cool crop time. I'll speak for me. My tomato went in the yard waste last year, or last week, all 10 feet by 8 feet of them with rotten black foliage and seedy, rotten tomatoes all over the place. It was quite a cleanup job. I probably should have done it 1 week before, but that stuff's done. You know, hot season stuff's got to go. I mean, it's done here for the winter. Spinach, kales, cabbage, carrots, beets, peas. I still got some peas going. There's quite a bit of stuff you might get a few more weeks out of, as long as we don't get super cold yet. But if we've emptied that bed out and I want to prepare a little bit for spring, again, we can do it anytime here in the winter. The first consideration would be to protect my soil. You know, do you have raised beds like I do? I have huge raised stone gardens that we grow all of ours in. You know, I'll throw a cover on it sometimes, whether it's straw, you get burlap. You can do a cover crop if that's your choice. Some people like to do, you know, like a winter clover, a vetch. You know, there's a few options of that around. You can throw some seed out, let that grow, and then flip it over in spring and have a little bit of debris and some nitrogen fixers in there to help out the spring garden as well. Sometimes be careful. The cover crops will get a little out of hand, and then you have some extra cover crop to pull out the next spring. But as long as you've got a good sized area, sometimes that might be the answer too. For us, with big, long, narrow beds, it's easy for me just to cover it physically with something. It'll help the soil. I mean, again, the winter is going to have a lot of rain. You're going to flush some of that nutrient through the system. So we either replenish it and help protect it as best we can. So lime is always a key in the vegetable garden if you're doing your lawn. I always do my vegetable garden at the same time as I do my lawn, spring and fall, a little bit extra lime on there. You want high calcium and a real sweet soil. You're growing much better vegetables doing it that way. And then protecting the soil would be the other big part of it too, okay? Next up is roses. Who's got roses? So we talked a little bit about, a couple people asked yesterday about pruning roses. But if you think of the rose, you know, again, I'm not as concerned about stripping it totally clean here in the fall. We absolutely have to start it over again in the spring. But my 2 weekends are always Veterans Day, which is next week, and President's Weekend. So like late February, those 2 time intervals, I always try to get kind of hip high in the fall, knee high come spring. Not climbing roses, because obviously we're trying to get those up and grow over something, so I'm not talking about those, but are typically bush roses of all kinds. We have to get them down to a manageable height in the fall, so we're not going to break. We want snow, we don't want anything breaking. I mean, my roses are still in bloom, for goodness sake, so I'm not rushing to do this next week. But at some point, we got to get it down to a comfortable height. And then February is the key, where we got to strip everything off of there. I want no foliage left. You're going to look at your rose with the naked eye and go, why would he tell me to cut all those leaves off? They look beautiful. You can't see the mildew, the black spot, everything that's already on there that's just going to keep it going for another season. So we want to cut it back as best we can, clean up all the leaves for sure. Do not leave the leaves mulched around roses, and then cut those canes down to where you want it to start out the season with. The food goes on in February, and off we go again, you know, for another good rose season. I would say this, just a couple things about roses. In the winter, you know, if we're preparing them for winter, I don't know if you've noticed with roses, but we really have 2 options these days. We call it budded or grafted roses. So if your typical traditional rose going back, you know, 100 years, Jackson and Perkins and all the rest that don't exist anymore, if I want a double delight, I have to buy a budded or grafted rose. That means I have a root system and a rose grafted onto that. That is the weak point. That is the part that's not cold hardy, not the rose, not the root, but the connection point. So if you're losing roses in the winter here, we're usually not cold enough this side of the mountains for that, then maybe we have to mulch the grafts a little bit with some compost for the winter and then spread that back out in spring kind of thing. I would look for own root roses. That's the only, we probably get, I bet you we're getting up there towards 60-70% for us. Anything I can get on root, that's what I choose. I mean, because then you have a no-brainer. I don't have any graft. I could be in Cleellum, I could be in Spokane, I could be anywhere I want, and that rose will survive the winter because the rose plant is hardy. Again, it's just that graft point that is not. So there's a lot of good indestructible roses that are on own root. It may not be your Double Delight, does not come on root, Mr. Lincoln, Peace. There's a lot of classic, hybrid tea roses mainly that can't grow their own root system. So if you want it, you have to buy it budded and you protect it a little bit. But there's some great modern ones and some older ones they found too, that if they do it the right way, they can develop their own roots. And you'll see for us, we're out of roses totally every year until February, but when our crop comes in January and we plant, you'll see on our list everything marked with OR, own root, own root, own root, own root. That'll tell you like, oh sweet, I don't have to worry about that at all. And if it's available, like I said, we'll get it that way versus budded, okay? So that's that would help your your rose hardiness, but the reason I always bring roses up in the fall, and I love roses. I had a huge rose garden before I had children. I'm an old dad. My boys are only 8 and 12. When they're out the house someday, I'll have my rose garden back because I don't have time to go on primp and prune it right now. So I have shrub roses for my roses, and I don't have to do much work on those at all, but I still get the summer color. So we want to remember that two things: Veterans Weekend, President's Weekend, hip high, knee high, clean up our leaves. If you've had issues, someone already asked about dormant spray. That is a perfect thing to hit once with copper at some point over the winter, and I would probably lean you towards the tail end of winter on that one, to be honest with you. And then off we go for spring. Yeah, they'll wake up pretty early, and then we have another good year. Okay. So next up, what are we doing for time here? I gotta go fast. So protecting tender specimens. We could probably talk a little bit of that after class, but I always laugh when I write that every year. House plant, garage plant, basement plant, covered plant. You can pick about 20 locations in the house where we can probably hide lots of things for the winter. My mother, bless her heart, still has the same red zonal geranium going for probably 35 years now, I would kind of estimate, and I keep offering to get her a new one. She's like, no thank you, I like my old one. So it sits in the cold garage in the winter and looks dead as a doornail and dries out to the tee of the bone, and then back outside in April, and I got it, lived again. So you would probably need to choose. It's not that I'm lazy and I don't have money to burn, but most annuals I'm like, you know what, is it really worth my time to try to save that thing? Sorry, Mom, but I will not. So I do save a couple of variegated geraniums that I can't find anymore in my garage. Beyond that, I would rather just send it to the compost heap in the sky and go find a fresh one next year. There's probably a new one I'd like even better anyway. So, but kind of think about that. House plant is the one extreme where we're inside, and I can almost promise you bugs. So when we go out to in to out, you're going to get bugs. So that's instantly like, okay, I'm going to bring this in. Before I do, I'm going to really clean it up. I'm going to probably get a little insecticides and neem oils. What would I use? Something like that does everything. So hopefully I don't have them in my house for the winter, because that's going to happen, I can promise you. Most of the time, what we get asked, it's about the fuchsia basket, it's about the geranium, it's about that kind of stuff. And again, we're almost going to torture that poor plant, cut it down to nothing, keep it really dry. I was talking to a guy yesterday who leaves for the winter. You got to beg your neighbor to come over here and just water that fuchsia basket for you like once a month, so it doesn't totally desiccate. Then we can pop that back outside in the sunlight. Hopefully we get by April or so, and it'll wake back up, put some food on it. It probably lasts again, but of course that's quickly followed by my comment like, that basket's probably really root bound at this point after growing for a year. Do you really want to save that for another season? Because it's not just saving it, it's probably getting it into a larger pot and doing some other things as well, which if you want to, great, more power to you. But I think I'll buy a new fuchsia basket and save the time. Okay, so tender specimens, transplanting and dividing. Again, we've had a good frost now, so I think you could probably have at whatever you want here going forward. You got from now till like the 1st of March. So if you're into cleaving up a perennial clump and chopping it, having some freebies, sharing them with friends, this is the only time of year we do that. I put that in the wrong place. I got to move it over to there. I got to divide this. I got to move that. All that stuff It's a perfect time of year to do it. So you got probably 3-4 months, as long as the ground is not frozen solid, which really doesn't happen around here very often. We wait a few days and do it when it thaws. I think you would be shocked if we had a little ground camera underneath there and you watched your plant in the winter, how much happens excuse me, under the soil that you can't see. So the sooner you get it moved, you're going to be that much better ahead going for the next summertime when you do get dry again. It's the same with planting. Everybody asks every day, can I still plant this tree? Absolutely. Get it in the ground. It's a great time to plant in the fall. It's also a great time to do those transplanting. I always bring one of these in because as long as you're careful, this is kind of a Conan the Barbarian weapon here. You can see the saw teeth. This will get your toe, I'll tell you right now, if you're not careful, so be careful. But this is the ultimate shovel. I mean, if you want to get a tool that makes your life easy, that's ergonomic. I step on that, I could cleave an old clump of hostas in about 5 seconds. I mean, that just goes right through anything. You can corner it, cleave it. It's a great shovel, I think, for digging anyway, but especially when we talk about transplanting or digging up a shrub. I can sever a root with the tip of that thing and get a nice root ball to move something if I need. So that may be put that on the Christmas list present, right? Get that on the Christmas list. Say, Santa, I would like a root slayer shovel, right? All right. Like the next one there, we kind of tied into it, falls for planting. I mean, it really is the best time of the year to plant. So I'd probably say half of my yard over the years has come from this place where I ran whites for a lot of years in the half price department. You know, sweet, we're getting rid of all. Right now there's probably 500 killer perennials back there on half price that look like, well, that's done for the year. Yeah, it is, but now I got a plant that's twice as nice and twice as big that'll wake up next spring, and I'm going to be even happier as a gardener. So get some stuff on sale. It's a great time of year to shop, but it really is the best time of year to plant too. So look at planting time. If you are going to plant, you know, this is the one time of year we would only use transplanter. You move something, put something in new. Don't get fancy rose food. Don't get roadie food. Wait till spring for that stuff. Just use Sure Start. You know, good organic transplant fertilizer. I'm worried about the root system only. That's not going to kick in a bunch of growth and cause it to break dormancy. We just want to develop the root system. So a good transplant fertilizer like that Sure Start's ideal, especially here for fall. It's great bulb food too. That's what we're only going to use for bulbs anymore as well. Same idea. Okay. We had pruning class yesterday, so I won't spend a huge amount of time on pruning. You can ask me after class if you missed the class yesterday, or we recorded it, so it'll be up on YouTube tomorrow. We've had a good frost. I'm not running out to do any pruning this weekend. I mean, we're just not quite there yet. We want to wait till the winter. I would say this, you know, if you're going to do anything here in the near future that's gone dormant, get your hydrangea flowers cut off. Don't cut the stems down. Just deadhead them so we don't have anything breaking over the winter. We've mentioned a couple other things, the roses, some things like that to tidy up. But I don't have to run out and prune my trees, do my fruit, get my blueberries. To me, that's probably a couple of months out still. We want to kind of focus that mid-January, mid-February time frame, and that's when I'll be teaching the classes here on pruning for production. We'll have our berry class early next February as well, so we can get a lot of that done a little later in the winter time. Okay. The one thing maybe to look for, you'll see on the list there, is just diseased, dead, and damaged wood. If I was unlucky enough to get a twig blight or something getting into one of my plants here summer, fall, I don't want to leave that so it can continue to travel through the tissue and maybe kill a larger branch or get to the main trunk. So maybe it's a quick little, let's scan the yard, make sure black is always the color to me. Black does not belong in the garden, right? For the most part, we can probably agree on that. So if we look for black twigs, Japanese maples, whatever plant it is, that's what I'm going to look for here more in the fall and say, okay, you're getting pruned out now before you have a chance to travel through the wood and do some permanent damage to my specimen. So we do that here pretty quick. Okay. Now you'll see with the class I put compost out. Good gardeners know compost fixes everything. You can't have enough compost. I looked this morning, I still have 7 bales behind the house I'm happy with, and I'll probably buy 5 more next week. I use compost for pretty much everything, including mulching. So this is the time of year. Bark is okay too. Keep in mind with bark, if I put a heavy wooded product down the ground, that's actually going to take nitrogen out of the soil as it rots and turns to compost. So you can use bark if that's your thing. Maybe put a little extra fertilizer underneath it so that it doesn't deplete your soil some. But compost will fix both. I can mulch my perennials with that. I can protect my rows. I can mulch some different things that I might be worried about and keep some weeds down as well. So if you need a little compost or bark, that's a good time of year to do that as well. So I think that I'm just going to show you a couple things here, then we'll do some questions. So, you know, we don't carry anything super fancy. Like, if anyone have frost cloth or remay? Anyone have frost cloth remay? So I always call it remay. Some people call it frost cloth. Now they call it harvest guard. I guess that sounds a little better. I can buy this in all kinds of different flavors and sizes and thicknesses and the rest. When I buy it for us, commercially, for us to use around here, I'm buying it by the degree, like +7 or +9 or +12. It's a pretty thick blanket that you would be surprised keeps things underneath quite a bit warmer. And this is one I get called a lot. Never use plastic. I just cannot stand driving around and seeing a hefty garbage bag wrapped around something in the front door and tied off. You're asking for problems with plastic. It's not going to give you any temperature protection, to be honest, and you're just creating an environment in there. If you forget to take it off, that plant's going to have problems. So this would be the way to go. Burlap, a sheet. I know, again, I think my mom used to use pantyhose, you know, that had runs in them, and that's what got tied around the rose grafts and things, you know, just a little extra insulation. But there's a lot of things we can use with something cloth, breathable. And this would be one in particular, probably more for the vegetable garden. You know, if I am trying to extend my harvest season on cool crops, this will offer me probably a couple extra weeks where I can cover my rows with that, keep the frost off that foliage, and probably get a little longer harvest out of it too. So something like Harvest Guard. I am not a huge glove guy, but I do have both of these. Well, actually, I don't have this anymore. I have the blue ones. But think of, you know, the winter, cold and wet. And if you're going to be out working, these are the two best gloves I've ever found here. We carry them every year. This is insulated. Like, I could probably go fishing up in Alaska, and I have dry hands and warm hands. I have big hands, and I'm warm anyway, so this is too warm for me. We'd have to get pretty darn cold for me to want to put that on. I like dry, so I get the blue ones because these are totally waterproof, but don't have the insulation. So we can still wash them. You turn them inside out because everyone knows gloves get a little smell to them after a while. But if you're looking for a winter pair in particular, not going to soak up the water, both those are pretty easy to put on, and I can use my fingers quite a bit. They're pretty useful gloves. We got both of those in. Yesterday, you can tell them, say, I was at his class yesterday too, and you can still have 20% off all the pruning stuff in the store. But if I was going to show you two things from yesterday, this is a really useful little pruning tool. So if you haven't had a pocket saw yet, I use this probably 10 to 1 over anything else in my yard these days. I can whip that open it up, get really good surgical cuts, especially when I'm digging into a lot of the plants we grow, multi-stem stuff. Really hard to get a lopper in there or a big saw. This is something I can get little pieces of wood cut out, pull branches out. It's great for blueberries, things like that are real thick, that are hard to get into the crown. That's a really useful little thing. And telling me I think we still got a bunch in there. You can have 20 on those. And the sharpener, who's got a sharpener so far? Everybody who comes, kind of got to get one of these. So that is a sweet little sharpener. If I've got my pruners out, I can lay them out, run them through the blade in 2 seconds. I got a perfectly sharp blade again, without having to take them apart, put them on the grinder, get a file. This is a great little sharpener for a lot of things. My wife has one in the house now, scissors, knives, everything else as well. But that's a
Cutting axe.
What's that?
A wood cutting axe.
I don't know that we could get an axe blade in there, but we got, loppers, head shears works on. I use it on my head shears now. Any kind of hand pruner at all, scissors, cleavers, knives. It's kind of got two sides to it. You can use it inside and outside as well. Yeah, it's a great little sharpener. You get $12 after the discount. That's a great. There's a stocking stuffer for you for the gardener. I think I should. Oh, the other thing I'll show you is this. So we didn't really talk. We talked about liquid herbicides, right? My big thing is if I spent some time cleaning a bed out. When I don't have any weeds left, I pull all the popweed, all the rest of it, and I've got compost down. How can I keep it that way? Some people lay out burlap in the winter. There's some other things you can do. I don't think that looks very pretty in the yard in the winter. But this is a pre-emergent that's organic. So we don't carry, casseron, all that stuff that's just chemical. Maybe if you had a driveway, you might want to try, but that's not for the garden to me. We want to use something that's safe. So corn gluten is the answer. This is a great pre-emergent herbicide. I've used it for years. Unfortunately, you can thank the world biodiesel takes up the good majority of that. So the price has gone from like, wow, that's really cheap, to like, come on, man, you're getting up, crossing the price has gone up quite a bit in the last 5 years on it. But it covers a pretty good area and does a pretty good job. If I've cleaned an area or I put this down and mulch over the top of it, that'll last usually for the season and not get you as many weeds. I mean, it's not going to be 100%, but it will help reduce the weeds. Corn gluten turns into fertilizer anyway. I've used it on my lawn for lawn food. You can do it kind of the same thing. It works as a pre-emergent for some weeds popping up, plus I get a little fertilizer out of it as well. We're trying to find a reasonably priced big bag of it again. That's what we're missing right now. Hopefully this winter we'll find something that's a little cost effective for everybody. But we do carry it in the pounds from Safer, and that's again the truly organic option for pre-emergent. Okay. So I think that probably got you a little bit of everything. I brought the compost in, bags and bales, just a reminder on the front there. So those are both on buy 3, get 1 free for the class. So if you need a compost or stock up, get some extra for the spring like I do, you'll be ready to go when we get a good price on it as well. Okay. So what do we got? You got some questions? Yes.
Moonbeam coreopsis.
Okay.
Do you prune it now? It's still looking good.
Yeah, again, most of the perennials are still going pretty strong. I've got a couple that have went totally brown, but I wouldn't be in a rush to do it. No, I give it at least a month, and that's one you can almost just let sit, and you can clean the whole thing up come late winter if you want to do it that way too. Yeah. Yes.
About the harvest guard.
Yeah.
So last year when we had the real cold snap, I have my citrus in my greenhouse, but it's not a heated greenhouse.
Okay.
So if you use the harvest guard on the citrus tree,
Yep.
does it go over the whole tree, or do you just wrap like the pot and the roots?
Oh, I would put it over the top of it for sure. You said it's not heated?
Not heated.
How big of a pot is it in?
It's in a good sized pot.
Good sized pot. I think definitely the foliage, the top part of it, but
Okay.
if you could wrap the whole thing and kind of tuck it on the top would be help too.
Okay.
I mean, citrus is a good one to ask about, because I'll be honest, if we were just like that much warmer, you just have a citrus tree outside, but the problem is it blooms in the winter and it throws everything out of whack. But that should be in a non-heated greenhouse, I'd be shocked unless we got super cold that you would ever lose it. Yeah, because that can handle some frost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I got mushrooms popping up.
Okay.
To get them out? What?
Well,
Make sure you get that.
I'm not going to call myself a mycologist by any means and pretend to ID your mushrooms for you, but the mushrooms are a sign that you have healthy soil. I'll start with that. You got decomposing wood, and I don't have a problem with having some mushrooms around. If they're poisonous, yeah, I'm worried about my kids and some other stuff too. If you want to get rid of mushrooms, knock them out as fast as you can, or you would get in the store there, we have a specific spray called Consan 20. And if I spray that on, not going to hurt anything else, but if I spray it on toadstools, mushrooms, fairy rings, all that stuff, you'll kill the mushrooms itself and they won't come back.
But digging them up?
Oh, I don't know that you're ever going to be able to dig them up. I think you're talking about more like breaking them off and then hoping that they haven't spored out to come back again. Yeah. I have them in my own yard, and I can follow 20 years ago there was a disgusting tree when I bought my house that somebody butchered in half and was like, I can't look at that. So I dug it out, and I could literally follow where the old root system was, is exactly where I get most of the mushrooms in my front yard. So yeah, wood, always wood. Yes.
So the items to your left, are any of those 20% off?
They are not. Well, some of this stuff we'll have on sale at some point in the winter. Like I said, the dormant sprays, I don't have enough yet to run a special on them. We're still waiting for our deliveries that I'll get here like right at Christmas, early January. So yeah, just the compost for the sale today. If you call me the register and beat me up, you can probably talk me into 20 on some of the other stuff though. How's that? If you say we're at the pruning class yesterday, that will ring as a tool, so that would be 20%. Yes. All right. Yes.
I have a forest fuchsia that I love the plant, and I was one day too late putting it into my unheated
Okay.
greenhouse,
Okay.
and all the leaves turned brown.
Yeah.
So you mentioned at one point cutting them back, but
Yeah.
then another time not cutting. Would I
No,
cut this
well,
one back?
okay, so when I say, I want to make sure we're clear. So when I'm saying don't cut back, that's hardy fuchsia. So if I had hardy fuchsia in my garden, which I do, or in a pot in my garden, I'm not doing anything with that until coming out of winter. If you've got an annual fuchsia like that, yes, you want to cut that back. I bet, I don't know that we got cold enough that you probably nuked that thing even for a couple nights.
Yeah, I'm hoping not.
What I would do is you want all that growth, you want to just leave literally a clump of twigs, and you might
Okay.
take your fingernail and just kind of nick the wood at the base and see if it's still green.
Okay.
If it is, you'll be fine. We can leave it in the cold basement, cold somewhere with a little light on it. Let it dry. That's the hardest part with this, I think, is you want to let it dry out, but you don't want to let it totally dry out.
Right,
So
right.
I most people's basements or garage or whatever, I would estimate like once a month is all.
Okay.
You give it a quick little sprinkle, it'll keep a little moisture in the soil. The plant will be okay, because if you're out there like every other day or every week, we're gonna rot it in the winter. Yeah, it's gonna be too much water.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
How about a tree fuchsia?
Tree fuchsia would be the same. Now
Don't
we,
cut it back the top at all?
well, you're gonna have to. You're bringing that in somewhere, yeah, because there's no way that's got a chance outside. We used to actually let a landscaper bring in hundreds of them down here years ago, and we quit doing it because we don't have the space for it anymore. But you want to strip it down, cut it way back, and definitely don't let that freeze, because that's not just basket, but we've also got grafts as well. Was it outside during the cold, or you had it in already?
I had already brought it in.
You brought it in, okay. So yeah, we want to cut that back and then follow the same exact instructions. Keep that on the dry side in the winter. Watch for bugs for sure. That's what we had to do on ours when we kept them here. And then once we get to, I'd probably guess by early April, mid-April, you can start kind of warming it back up and then go back right back outside again. Yep. Yep. All right, yeah.
Snap peas and
Snow peas?
sweet peas.
Okay.
They get mildew.
Yeah.
Should they be taken out?
Well, I bet at some point you're going to be taking them down
At
here
some
in a
point,
couple
yeah.
weeks either way. You know.
Should the soil
Wouldn't worry about the soil. As long as we get the debris out of there,
Okay.
you'll be fine. It's not going to be something in the soil. Especially when you get to spring, because I'm assuming you're going to do lime, food, turn everything over, mix it up, and then replant seeds. You'll be fine. Yeah, for springtime.